A look at Klondike Canoes, a true testament to UP craftsmanship.
I brought down my dad's very first canoe. It was the Great Experiment. It's something he had toyed with for a long time.
9 million acres of forest, 1,700 miles of continuous shoreline, 4,300 lakes, 12,000 miles of streams, more than 300 waterfalls, 15 counties, 2 time zones, and 1 area code. Welcome to the Upper Peninsula. Welcome to 906 Outdoors. Canoes were, and still are, an essential tool for fur trappers and explorers alike, and have become popular as recreational and sporting watercraft. They played a key role in the exploration of North America, and were around for thousands of years before that. A great place to get a look at some of the more recent history, the last 100 years or so, is the UP chapter of the Wooden Canoe Heritage Association Assembly, which was held at Tourist Park in Marquette. This year's featured canoe was the Klondike. Klondike is no ordinary canoe, and this particular one was no ordinary Klondike.
This is my dad's first canoe. It was far from perfect, but it was very functional. One of the problems he had with this canoe was the canvas on it was too lightweight, and it didn't hold up well to the abuse of his children. We pulled it out of service before it got too bad, and hopefully we can get new canvas on there and use it again for another many years. The canoes you see up here were made up of on a mold which my father didn't like. They didn't have enough tumble home. The sides came up, flared out a little bit, and it was hard to paddle. So he decided not to sell them and distributed them to family members instead. We got a few up here which will get doled out here someday to family. They're still beautiful pieces of work. The canoe we're working on now, Craig Kitchen and his partner out there are great people from what I see. They're talented craftsmen and they deserve a chance to be shown how one is put together. My father's been passed away about 20 years ago. I didn't know what was going to happen with his old shop, so the sentimental value of the molds and the tools and the material he had stockpiled led me to bringing it over to my shop. And my son Joe and I started that canoe about 10 years ago, I'd say. Bent the ribs on it. And as life goes on, we all got too busy and never got back to it. So this is an opportune time to finish that canoe and refresh my memory on how they were put together before I forget it all.
This whole project was started because the Klondike Canoe is, I think, the only commercially made canoe, wood canvas canoe in the UP. And even though Elmer didn't finish it, it is still made in the UP. Steve and I completely built it in the UP. And so it continues to be a UP boat. even though it is a Klondike, second generation Klondike, if you want to call it that.
Today's show is brought to you in part by Rapid River Knife Works, home of Michigan's largest custom knife factory showroom.
The canoe we're building now is a 14-footer. It's a little rounder canoe. It makes a nice river canoe. It's got a little rocker in the bottom. He also had a mold that you could either make a 16 or an 18-foot, and that was flatter on the bottom with a nice keel, a little better for open water. They're both beautiful and functional canoes. You work on canoes, you find out you need all sorts of little gadgets and special tools and whatnot. And handy guy like my father was, he made them, or he was gifted with a father-in-law who was a blacksmith. You couldn't buy them, he could make them. In fact, the knife I'm whittling, planking and whatnot with was a knife that my grandfather had made and given me. They're beautiful pieces of work. Just a good sharp knife, block plane, lots of sandpaper, and time. My father had it down, it'd take about 80 hours to build a canoe. I'll tell you, when he first started, it was a lot longer than that. The father's shop was always a good place to stop and have a beer at the end of the day. We'd help him with the ribs and stretching the canvas, and he'd recruit my sons over there to help him pull the ribs on. It takes two to grab a hot rib, get it bent around there while it's still hot. I have a son who enjoyed lots of time with my father, and he would like to build a canoe or two. Having grown up in households where everything is made, it's passed on to my sons too. They're just wonderfully talented craftsmen. I hope we can pass that on again to my grandchildren. It's a real gift to be able to work with your hands and understand how things are done. Our computer age has made us lose a lot of that. Planking is only like 5/32 of an inch thick. You lay it on there, and where they overlap, you have to scribe them and cut them so they fit. You don't want to force them into place, because eventually when you take it out the mold, the canoe will spring out of shape. So you have to let the planks lay where they want to lay and make them fit. Once you're done getting the planking down close to the gunnels, you have to leave the bow so you can spread it apart and spring it off of the mold. And then you go back in and you refasten it to the bow and the stern and get your last pieces of planking on it. You have to sand the planking again, like we did the ribs, just to get it fared out, nice shape. Then you are pretty much ready for canvas.
Once we get the planking on, so we brought it back to Marquette and we started fairing up the hull, getting it all nice and smooth, and then we canvassed it. Canvassing the canoe is not that big of a deal. You anchor both ends of the canvas, and one end of the anchor has a come-along on it, and you stretch it with the come-along. Once you get it stretched lengthwise, the next part of it is stretching it onto the canoe itself, stapling it down as you pull it, and then you go in the other direction, the same thing, pulling it down and stapling as you get it stretched. Hopefully you get everything so that it looks all even. Once it was canvassed, the big thing then is filling the canvas. That took about 4 or 5 coats of the filler, sanding and sanding and sanding, and then painting. And I think Steve has 7 coats of paint on the hull. Then comes the gunnels and the seats and the stem bands. And all in all, I think it took us about 3 months to do that.
"906 Outdoors" is brought to you by Cooking Wild Seasonings. Make it fresh, make it yours. It's time to make you hungry. Brought to you by Cooking Wild Seasonings.
A combination oil, I like to use a blend of coconut, avocado, and sunflower. It's got a nice high smoke point to it, so I can get the pan really, really nice and hot and get a nice good sear on the fish. This is a fish taco seasoning. It's a little bit different than if I was gonna use like ground beef or ground chicken. It doesn't have quite the hot chili powder, so it's a little bit lighter. They're beautiful pieces of fish. I like to serve my tacos a little bit differently also. So we're gonna be putting them in cabbage leaves with a little bit of a cilantro slaw and a lime cream. So you can see it's starting to flake already. So it really doesn't need much time. The reason I like cast iron is I can get a real nice high sear on it and I can put it right into the oven. I can take it out, I can use it on the grill, and I can use it over a campfire. The other reason that I really, really like cast iron is the iron is bioavailable to our bodies a little bit more than taking an iron supplement or something like that. So you're getting the iron that your body needs in a real easy way just by cooking. Look at the beautiful crust on there. You cannot get that in a Teflon pan. And Teflon is really not supposed to be used at a high heat. If you have birds in the house, it can really, really harm them because of the vapors that it off-gasses. So now we're gonna go on to the slaw. Some red cabbage, some slivered carrots, a little bit of Napa cabbage, and some sweet onion. And then the dressing that we're going to make, a couple tablespoons of sour cream, a little bit of mayo, really good. I'm gonna do a fresh squeeze of lemon, catch the seeds. I'm gonna put a couple of drops of lime oil. Okay, so we're gonna use a little bit of this in here, not too much. Now you could easily use a corn or a flour shell. I'm always the one that wants to get more veggies.
.906 Outdoors is brought to you by Race Driven, your source for premier power sports products.
This year, the Wooden Canoe Heritage Association had its 40th International Assembly in Paul Smith, New York, in the Adirondacks. And that's where all of this started, with the international assemblies, most of them at Paul Smith. Our attempt over the years has been to kind of replicate that international assembly, but have it more as a regional type of a thing. Our attempt is to meet the needs of the paddlers from the Marquette, Wisconsin, Lower Michigan, Minnesota, even parts of Canada, meet the needs of this region. And that's part of the reason why we decided to do the special focus being on the Klondike Canoe this year, is so that it would be representing something that was very specific, very special for our region. This year is the 7th annual Upper Great Lakes Regional Assembly. And the way that it has worked was we started, I think it was in 2013, with the Regional Assembly. And then the next year it went to Spooner, Wisconsin, Shell Lake, Wisconsin. And they had the Regional Assembly there. And then the next time was at Lake City. It has rotated through different regions. Last year it was in Ely, Minnesota, and this year it was our turn to have it back in Marquette. And so right now we have, I think, 39 people registered to come to the Regional Assembly. They'll display canoes. There'll be different types of demonstrations of freestyle paddling, canoe safety, different things like that. There'll be a person making laminated canoe paddles, and I'll be doing a demonstration on different aspects of repairing wooden canoes when they get damaged. There'll be those types of things that are going on at this year's Regional Assembly. And that, again, the goal is to meet the needs of the paddlers in this area. In the past, we've had, I think, up to 70 canoes in there. Anywhere from a work canoe, like some of the old towns are. The Klondike Canoes are a well-made canoe, but they are also a work canoe. And they're also courting canoes, like were used at Belle Isle and at the different canoe liveries that were in some of the major cities. And there will be sailing canoes there. There's going to be at least 2 very special centerboard sailing canoes that there's only a handful of them in the world. And so there's everything from the everyday wooden canvas canoe all the way through to very select, almost museum type kinds of canoes. And there will be birch bark canoes there, and Ferdy Good will be demonstrating the building of birch bark canoes and different aspects of building birch bark canoes. So there'll be a couple other people that will be demonstrating or showing birch bark canoes and what they're like, and the special aspects of birch bark canoes, because the birch bark canoe is actually a wood canvas canoe but covered with birch bark. The construction of the canoe is very, very similar, and when they started having difficulty getting enough birch bark to make canoes, they started playing with things like canvas, and that's how the wood canvas canoe originated. And we're even encouraging people that have fiberglass or Kevlar or aluminum canoes to bring them on down so we can all paddle together. It's all part of that evolution of paddle sports in this region. For the regional assembly this weekend, Buzz, who is Elmer's son, and Buzz's son are coming down along with Buzz's wife and some other family members, and they will get to see this canoe and hopefully talk about what it's like for them to see the thing finished. And they're bringing the form that this canoe was built on, as well as Elmer's first canoe.
We had Steve and Craig at the shop for a few sessions. They got the canoe all planked and got it pulled off the mold, brought it to their shop here in Marquette, and finished her up. They're proud of their work, and I'm proud of the two that managed to get it together. It was a treat to see two old guys do it, and come to find out we were all the same age, so it was fun. I brought down my dad's very first canoe. It was the Great Experiment. It's something he had toyed with for a long time. Finally found the time of his life to get it together. At that time, his shop was in the basement of the house, so things were a little cramped. And over a period of winters, he'd pull out the parts, get the mold together, work on it for a while, get a cabinet in order, take it back apart, store it away. Well, finally, he got one off the mold. And it is by no means perfect, and he knew it. So it evolved into something as perfect as you see over there. They're perfect canoes.
906 Outdoors is brought to you in part by NutriFeed, nutritional feed solutions for deer and horses. The canoe did make one stop prior to its arrival at the assembly for a chance to do what it was meant to do: float.
This is the day that we've waited for about 6 months now, 5 months, and that's putting the boat in the water. The boat has never seen the water. It's seen the rain, so it's seen water, but it has never been floating before. So this is the exciting part of working with a canoe, is getting it on the water for the first time. And the boat is a tandem canoe. It has 2 seats in it, but I'll be paddling it solo this morning, which is exciting for me. You know, I love paddling solo and seeing how it will handle when I sit in it. And hopefully I don't go swimming. It floats.
He probably made canoes over, say, a period of about 10 years. At first it was just when he had time, and then he finally got to the point where he retired, and that was his primary project. He would go to the Wooden Canoe Heritage Association every year, and he would pick up a few sales. And part of the enjoyment of making the canoes was delivering them for people. And he went as far as the West Coast put the canoe on top of the pickup, throw Mother in the truck, and off they'd go for a trip. That was good days for them.
When we put it on the trailer, he was excited about that. You know, he said 20 years to get to this point, and now he'll get to see it on the water. The hope that I have is he's proud of how it turned out. So Steve and I are, but it's a beautiful boat.
Where the canoes were sold is pretty diverse. Locally in the UP is probably the most of them. Probably half of those he made are not objects that people use day to day, but they're probably hanging on the den wall because they are such beautiful pieces of work.
It's just so exciting to have it out on the water and seeing how it handles and how stable it is and or unstable, depending on how you look at it, and just seeing what this is what the canoe can do and what it's made for, and here we are.
Klondike evolved around this beautiful place called Trap Rock Valley. It was probably one of the coldest spots next to Amasa in the UP. So my dad always thought this was a little bit like the Klondike for being as cold as it was. And when he first moved here, my mother talked him into getting a herd of cows. And so he had his taste of cold winter weather out taking care of the cows. Fortunately, he was a good enough craftsman. Eventually, he got away from the cows and moved into what he loved the most, and that was carpentry work.
An incredible job of designing the hull. It's just a beautiful boat. Matter of fact, one of the ones that we'll be picking up is one of the ones that Elmer made. The guy has paddled it once, and he says it's too beautiful to put it in the water.
Dad always enjoyed doing projects. He made snowshoes, he made baskets, and then he decided he wanted to build a wooden cedar canvas canoe. And at that time, he had his shop in the basement of the house. It was a crowded place. And when things would get slow in the winter, he'd start thinking about building the canoe and started building a mold. And then he'd get a job. He'd have to take the mold all back apart, store it away. Next winter, he'd get it out, work on it for a while again. And eventually, he got a carpenter shop built. He had room to put the molds together, and slowly he developed the canoe. It takes lots of hours of thinking and planning to get the mold made, figuring out how all the parts lay on the mold. It took a few molds before he found a shape of canoe that he really liked.
It was incredible. The boat is real nimble. It's stable. It rolls on its side real easy, so you can play with it. It's just a neat boat. So I can't say enough good about it. It's just great. So.
Join 906 Outdoors on Facebook to see where we've been and where we're going, and get a glimpse of what's happening around the UP. And stop in at 906outdoors.com, where you can watch any of our past shows and see what's coming up next. Thanks for sticking around, and we'll see you next week right here on 906 Outdoors.